The void of space carried no sound, but Admiral Sarah Chen could hear the screaming anyway. It echoed through the emergency transmission that had reached Earth's outer colonies just 6 hours ago, a desperate plea from the peaceful Kythera system, broadcast on every frequency they could manage before their communications went dark. "Ma'am, the fleet is ready." Commander Marcus Webb stood at attention beside her captain's chair aboard the UES Retribution, humanity's newest dreadnought. Around them, the bridge hummed with quiet efficiency as officers prepared for what might be their species' first interstellar war. Sarah's weathered hands gripped the armrests as she stared at the tactical display. 47 human vessels hung in formation around them, destroyers, cruisers, and 3 massive dreadnoughts. Not the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled, but certainly the most lethal. Earth's military doctrine had evolved from centuries of warfare on humanity's death world, and now they were about to introduce that doctrine to the galaxy. "Signal the fleet," Sarah commanded, her voice carrying the weight of a woman who had survived the Martian uprising and the Europa mining wars. "All ships, prepare for jump to hyperspace. We're going to show these raiders what happens when they threaten innocent people in our neighborhood." The transmission from Kythera Prime still played on repeat in her mind. A young voice, barely more than a child, begging for help as explosions thundered in the background. The Kythera were a peaceful species, herbivorous, gentle, with technology, focused on art and philosophy rather than warfare. They had welcomed humanity into the galactic community with open arms just 5 years ago. Now someone was butchering them. Jump in 3, 2, 1. Space twisted, and the human fleet vanished into the hyperspace tunnel, carrying with it the concentrated fury of a species that had clawed its way to the top of the food chain on one of the galaxy's most dangerous worlds. Behind them, Earth's leaders waited anxiously for news. Ahead of them, an ancient enemy was about to learn why humans were called Deathworlders by every species that had ever encountered them. The war for galactic peace was about to begin, and humanity intended to win it with the only currency they understood: overwhelming, ruthless force. Chapter 1. First Contact with Hell. The Kythera system looked like a graveyard when the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace. Admiral Chen stood silent as the tactical displays populated with data that made her stomach clench. 17 burning hulks drifted where Kythera's orbital platforms had once hung like jewels around their homeworld. The planet itself was scarred with impact craters visible even from orbit, and the smaller colonies on the outer worlds showed no signs of life. "Dear God," whispered Lieutenant Torres from the sensor station. "Ma'am, I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. These aren't random raiders. This is a full-scale invasion fleet." The main screen shimmered and resolved into an image that would haunt Sarah's dreams for years to come. Ships, hundreds of them, sleek and predatory, their black hulls absorbing light like hungry shadows. They moved with purpose around Kythera Prime, some descending toward the surface while others maintained orbital positions. "IFF signatures?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer would be grim. "Unknown configuration, Admiral, but the energy readings." Torres paused, his face pale. "Ma'am, these ships are putting out power signatures that dwarf our own vessels. We're looking at technology that's at least 2 centuries ahead of ours." Commander Webb moved closer to Sarah's chair. "Orders, ma'am?" Sarah studied the display for a long moment. 47 human ships against several hundred advanced alien vessels. The smart play would be to retreat, report back to Earth, and wait for reinforcements. The safe play would be to avoid engagement entirely. But the transmission from Kythera Prime was still echoing in her mind, and Sarah Chen had not survived 30 years of military service by making the safe play. "Signal the fleet. Combat Formation Alpha 7. All ships are to prepare for immediate engagement." She paused, then added in a voice that carried throughout the bridge, "And patch me through to the entire fleet. Every ship, every crew member." The communications officer nodded. "You're live, Admiral." Sarah stood, her uniform crisp despite the tension that filled the bridge. When she spoke, Her voice carried the authority of someone who had never backed down from a fight. "This is Admiral Chen to all ships and crew. You've seen the tactical display, you know the odds. What you need to understand is this. Somewhere down on that planet, there are Kithara civilians hiding in shelters, hoping someone will come to help them. They sent out a call for aid, and we answered." She paused, letting that sink in before continuing. "The enemy has superior numbers and superior technology. What they don't have is superior will. They don't understand what it means to come from a world where everything tries to kill you from the moment you're born. They don't know what it's like to fight for every breath, every meal, every day of your life." On screens throughout the fleet, crew members straightened at their stations. In weapons bays and engine rooms, technicians checked their equipment one final time. In fighter bays, pilots climbed into cockpits with the grim determination of people who had always known this day would come. "We are the descendants of predators," Sarah continued. "We are the children of a death world that forged us in fire and blood and endless conflict. Today we're going to show this galaxy what that means. Today we're going to show them why humans don't abandon our friends." The fleet began to move, 47 ships accelerating toward an enemy force 5 times their size. Behind them, hyperspace beacons would carry word of the battle back to Earth. Ahead of them, an ancient enemy was about to receive a lesson in human warfare. "All ships, weapons free. Target the ships closest to the planet first. We're going in, hard and fast, and we're not stopping until every last one of those bastards is either dead or running." Sarah settled back into her command chair. Time to work. The first human interstellar war had begun, and it would be fought by the rules that had kept humanity alive on the most dangerous world in the galaxy. Fight harder, fight smarter, and never, ever give up. The alien fleet was about to learn why humans were the apex predators of their own world, and why that made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Chapter 2. The Swarm Strikes Back. The battle began with fire and ended with respect. Admiral Chen watched as the human fleet crashed into the alien formation like a hammer striking glass. The first salvo from the UES Retribution vaporized 2 enemy ships, their exotic hulls no match for humanity's crude but devastatingly effective kinetic weapons. Around them, the rest of the fleet opened fire with a fury that lit up the Kithara system like a new star. "Direct hit on enemy command vessel," shouted Lieutenant Torres. Multiple secondary explosions across their formation. But the aliens were not defenseless. As the human fleet pressed their attack, the enemy ships began to respond with weapons technology that defied human understanding. Beams of coherent energy lanced through space, striking human vessels and overloading their shields in seconds. The destroyer UES Havoc simply vanished in a flash of light, her crew of 200 gone in an instant. "They're adapting to our attack patterns," Commander Webb reported grimly. "And their weapons, Jesus, Admiral, they're cutting through our armor like paper." Sarah gripped her chair as the Retribution shuddered under enemy fire. The alien fleet was reforming, their initial surprise giving way to coordinated counterattack. For every enemy ship the humans destroyed, they lost one of their own. The mathematics of the battle were becoming brutally clear. But humanity had not conquered their death world through superior technology. They had done it through superior tactics, superior will, and the kind of vicious cunning that only came from a lifetime of fighting impossible odds. "Signal all fighter squadrons," Sarah commanded. "Deploy immediately. I want every fighter we have hitting their flanks while our capital ships press the center." "Ma'am, our fighters won't be able to penetrate their defensive screens," Webb protested. Sarah smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "They don't need to penetrate them, Marcus. They just need to get close enough to deliver their payload." Across, the fleet fighter bays opened like hungry mouths. Hundreds of small craft poured out. Not the sleek interceptors that most galactic species favored, but ugly, brutal attack fighters designed for one purpose: getting close to enemy ships and doing as much damage as possible before being destroyed. Each fighter carried a modified antimatter warhead that Earth's military had developed in secret. Not sophisticated by galactic standards, but effective in the same way that a club was effective. Simple, direct, and devastating when applied with sufficient force. The aliens tried to intercept the fighter squadrons with their own defensive craft, and for a moment it seemed like they might succeed. Their ships were faster, more maneuverable, equipped with weapons that could vaporize a human fighter at extreme range. But human pilots had been trained in an environment where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death. They flew with the reflexes of predators and the cunning of survivors, weaving through enemy formations with a reckless skill that spoke of generations spent fighting in Earth's violent skies. Fox Squadron is through their perimeter, came the voice of squadron leader Patricia Valdez. Beginning attack runs on their heavy units. Sarah watched as the tiny human fighters swarmed around the massive alien vessels, like angry wasps around a bear. One by one, they dove toward their targets, each pilot knowing they would not survive the encounter, but determined to make their deaths count. The first antimatter warhead detonated against the hull of an alien dreadnought, and the explosion was visible across the entire system. The ship didn't just die. It came apart at the molecular level, its exotic materials unable to contain the raw fury of annihilation itself. "My God," whispered Torres. "They're actually doing it." More explosions followed as human fighters completed their suicide runs. The alien fleet, for all their technological superiority, had never encountered an enemy willing to trade lives at such a ratio. Their formations began to waver as ship after ship fell to the swarming human fighters, but the aliens were not finished. As their losses mounted, they began to retreat toward the outer system, their surviving ships falling back in good order. For a moment, Sarah thought they might be withdrawing entirely. Then the sensors detected something that chilled her blood. "Admiral," Torres called out, his voice tight with fear. "I'm detecting massive energy buildup from the retreating fleet. It looks like they're preparing to bombard the planet." Sarah's blood turned to ice. The aliens weren't retreating. They were positioning themselves to glass Kythera Prime from orbit, eliminating the planet's population rather than allow it to fall into human hands. "All ships, maximum acceleration," she commanded. "We have to stop them before they can complete the bombardment." The human fleet, battered and bloodied but still fighting, surged forward in a desperate race against time. Behind them, the wreckage of 24 human ships drifted silent in space. Ahead of them, the aliens were preparing to commit genocide on a scale that would make them pariahs throughout the galaxy. The battle for Kythera Prime was about to reach its climax, and Sarah Chen was about to learn whether human determination could overcome alien technology when the stakes were measured in billions of innocent lives. The answer would define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. Chapter 3. When Predators Hunt. The race to save Kythera Prime became a nightmare of physics and desperation. Admiral Chen watched the tactical display with growing horror as the alien fleet arranged itself in bombardment formation above the planet. Energy readings spiked across her sensors as the enemy ships began charging weapons capable of cracking a world's crust. She had perhaps 10 minutes before they opened fire. The human fleet, reduced to 31 ships after the savage battle, pushed their engines beyond safe limits in a desperate sprint to intercept. But even at maximum acceleration, they would be too late by several minutes, an eternity when measured in civilian lives. "Ma'am, incoming transmission," called the communications officer. It's from the planet's surface." The main screen flickered to life, revealing a figure that made Sarah's heart clench. It was a Kythera child, no more than 8 years old by human standards, her large eyes wide with terror. Behind her, the ruins of what had once been a beautiful city smoldered in the distance. "Please," the child whispered in accented but clear English. "Please help us. They're coming back. Mama says they're going to make the sky fall down." The transmission cut off, replaced by the cold tactical display, showing the alien fleet's steady progress toward firing position. In the background, Sarah could hear the bridge crew's sharp intake of breath. Every human on every ship had just seen the face they were fighting to save. "Admiral," Commander Webb said quietly, "we're not going to make it in time." Sarah stared at the display for a long moment, her mind racing through options that all seemed to end in failure. The aliens had positioned themselves perfectly, using their superior speed to gain a tactical advantage that human courage couldn't overcome. Then, Lieutenant Torres spoke up from his sensor station, his voice trembling with either excitement or terror. "Ma'am, I'm detecting something strange. The alien ships, they're clustering together in a tight formation for the bombardment. All of them concentrated in a sphere approximately 2 kilometers in diameter." Sarah's head snapped up. "Show me." The tactical display zoomed in, revealing the alien fleet arranged in a perfect three-dimensional formation above Kythera Prime. It was tactically sound. The overlapping fields of fire would ensure complete planetary coverage. But it was also something else. It was vulnerable. "Marcus," Sarah said slowly, "what's the yield on our largest nuclear warhead?" Webb blinked in confusion. "Ma'am, our standard antimatter torpedoes have a yield of, not antimatter, nuclear, the old-fashioned kind we keep in emergency storage." Understanding dawned in Webb's eyes, followed immediately by horror. "Admiral, you can't be serious. The largest nuclear device we carry is a 50-megaton warhead designed for planetary cracking. If we detonate that in the middle of their formation, it would probably destroy most of their fleet in one shot," Sarah finished. "The question is, can we get it there?" Torres was already running calculations. "The blast radius would be enormous, ma'am. Even our fastest courier drone couldn't escape. The explosion. It would be a suicide mission." Sarah stood and walked to the main viewport, staring out at the distant planet where millions of innocent beings waited for salvation or death. The faces of her own crew reflected in the transparent aluminum, young men and women who had joined the fleet to protect humanity and had found themselves fighting for an entire species they barely knew. "Signal the fleet," she said quietly. "I want every captain to hear this directly." The communications officer nodded. "You're live to all ships." "Admiral," Sarah took a breath and spoke to the 40,000 humans under her command. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a chance to save Kythera Prime, but it will cost us. The enemy has clustered their fleet for bombardment, making them vulnerable to a single, massive nuclear strike. The problem is delivery." She paused, letting them understand what she was about to ask. "I need a volunteer crew to fly a courier drone loaded with our largest nuclear warhead directly into the center of their formation. The crew will not survive the mission. Their sacrifice will save billions of lives and deal a blow to this enemy that they will never forget." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every ship in the fleet volunteered. Every crew, every captain offered to lead the mission personally. Sarah felt tears she didn't know she was capable of shedding run down her cheeks. This was why humanity had survived their death world. Not because they were individually stronger or smarter than other species, but because when it mattered most, they would sacrifice everything for strangers who couldn't defend themselves. "I appreciate the volunteers," she said finally, "but I'm pulling rank. This mission goes to the crew of the UES Retribution. We have the best navigation system and the most experienced pilots. Commander Webb will lead a skeleton crew to deliver the warhead. The rest of you will withdraw to safe distance and prepare to mop up any survivors." Webb stepped forward. "Ma'am, I volunteer to stay aboard as well." Sarah shook her head. "Marcus, I need you to take command of the fleet when this works. The war won't end here. Someone needs to carry word back to Earth about what we've learned." The bridge crew was already preparing for the mission, their movements efficient despite the knowledge that they were preparing their own deaths. Engineers modified a courier drone to carry the massive warhead. Navigation officers plotted the most direct course to the alien formation. Weapons officers armed the device with a timer that would ensure detonation at the optimal moment. As the preparations continued, Sarah found herself thinking about the Kythera child on the transmission, about the billions of innocents sheltering below, about the human crews who would witness their sacrifice and carry the story to the rest of the galaxy. Humanity had been underestimated once again. The aliens had seen their primitive technology and assumed they were dealing with a minor threat. They had not understood that humans were the survivors of a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years, that they had evolved not just to fight but to win at any cost. "Courier drone ready for launch," reported the weapons officer. "Nuclear device armed and secured. Flight time to target, 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Sarah nodded and opened a channel to the fleet. All ships withdraw to minimum safe distance. We'll see you on the other side. The UES Retribution broke formation and accelerated toward the alien fleet, carrying with it the hopes of 2 species and the fury of a 3rd. Behind them, the human fleet fell back, knowing they were about to witness either humanity's greatest victory or its most costly defeat. The final act of the battle for Kythera Prime was about to begin, and it would be written in nuclear fire against the stars themselves. The UES Retribution flew alone into the jaws of death, carrying humanity's fury compressed into 50 megatons of nuclear fire. Admiral Chen stood on her bridge as they approached the alien formation, the massive enemy ships growing larger on the view screen with each passing second. Around her, the skeleton crew worked with the quiet efficiency of people who had accepted their fate and found peace in serving something greater than themselves. 2 minutes to optimal release point, announced Lieutenant Torres, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to do. The alien fleet hung before them like a 3-dimensional constellation of death, their ships arranged in perfect formation for planetary bombardment. Energy readings continued to climb as the enemy weapons charged toward firing readiness. Sarah estimated they had perhaps 3 minutes before Kythera Prime would begin dying. "Admiral," called the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the alien fleet. They're hailing us." Sarah raised an eyebrow. After hours of savage combat, the enemy wanted to talk? "Put it through." The main screen flickered and resolved into an image that sent chills down every human spine. The alien was tall, easily 8 feet in height with chitinous armor that seemed to absorb light. Multiple eyes arranged around a skeletal head regarded them with what might have been amusement. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of millennia. So, the young species chooses defiance over wisdom. The alien's words came through the universal translator with cold precision. "You have fought well for primitives, but this ends now. Withdraw and we will grant you the mercy of a swift death. Continue your approach and we will ensure your species learns the price of interference." Sarah stepped forward, her own image, broadcast to the alien fleet. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had never backed down from a threat. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Space Forces. You have attacked a peaceful species under our protection. You have murdered civilians. You have brought war to a system that wanted only peace." She paused, letting her words sink in before delivering humanity's final message to their ancient enemy. "And now you're going to learn what happens when you threaten something a human has decided to protect." The alien's multiple eyes seemed to focus more intently on her. "You speak boldly for someone about to die. Your primitive vessel cannot penetrate our defenses. Your weapons cannot harm our ships. What do you imagine you can accomplish with this gesture?" Sarah smiled, and it was the expression of a predator who had been underestimated one too many times. "We're going to teach you why humans are called Deathworlders. We're going to show you what evolution on the galaxy's most dangerous planet produces, and we're going to make sure you never threaten innocent people again." 1 minute to release. "Point," Torres called out softly. The alien seemed to consider her words for a moment. "Your species is young and foolish, but not without potential. Join us. Serve the hegemony as your betters have for eons past. We offer you the chance to survive the coming cleansing." "Counteroffer," Sarah replied. "Go to hell." She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. 30 seconds, people. It's been an honor serving with you." Around the bridge, officers straightened at their stations. In the courier bay, the modified drone sat ready for launch, its nuclear payload armed and waiting. Through the ship's corridors, the skeleton crew of volunteers prepared for what they all knew would be their final moments. 10 seconds, Torres announced. Sarah gripped her command chair and thought about Earth, about blue skies and green forests and the endless struggle that had forged humanity in fire and blood. She thought about the Kythera child who had pleaded for help. She thought about the billions of innocents who would live because 47 human ships had answered a call for aid. "Launch," she commanded. The courier drone shot from the Retribution. Like a bullet, its engines burning at maximum output as it raced toward the center of the alien formation. Behind it, the human dreadnought began a sharp turn, trying to gain as much distance as possible in the seconds remaining. The aliens detected the drone immediately, their point defense system swiveling to track the small craft. Energy beams lanced out, but the drone was small and fast, weaving through their fire with programmed evasion patterns that had been refined through centuries of human warfare. 20 seconds to detonation, Torres counted down. The alien formation began to scatter as they realized the threat, but 50 megatons of nuclear fire had a blast radius measured in tens of kilometers. Even their superior technology couldn't overcome the simple physics of atomic annihilation when delivered with such concentration. 10 seconds. Sarah watched as the drone reached the center of the alien formation, a tiny speck of metal and circuitry, carrying humanity's final answer to those who would threaten the innocent. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The nuclear warhead detonated with the fury of a newborn star. For a moment, space itself seemed to scream as atoms split and released the fundamental forces that held matter together. The blast expanded, outward at a significant fraction of light speed, engulfing the alien formation in a sphere of pure destruction. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia simply ceased to exist, their exotic hulls and advanced technology no match for humanity's crude but effective solution to the problem of enemy fleets. The UES Retribution rode the edge of the E shockwave, her hull groaning under stresses that threatened to tear her apart. Emergency systems activated as radiation flooded the ship, but her crew hung on with the determination of people who had already accepted death and been granted an unexpected reprieve. When the light faded and the sensors cleared, the alien fleet was gone. Where hundreds of ships had hung in perfect formation, only expanding clouds of plasma remained. The threat to Kythera Prime had been eliminated in a single devastating stroke. "My God," whispered Torres. "We actually did it." Sarah slumped in, her command chair suddenly feeling every one of her 58 years. Around her, the bridge crew began damage assessments and casualty reports, their voices subdued by the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. "Signal the fleet," she said quietly. "Tell them the primary threat has been neutralized. And get me a channel to Kythera Prime." Minutes later, the face of the Kythera child appeared on her screen again, but this time the terror was replaced by wonder. Behind her, adult Kythera were emerging from shelters, looking up at skies that were no longer filled with enemy ships. "The bad ships are gone," the child said in amazement. "Did you make them go away?" Sarah nodded, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. "Yes, sweetheart, they're gone. You're safe now." The child smiled, the first smile Sarah had seen from any Kythera since arriving in the system. "Thank you. Mama wants to know. Will you stay? Will you help us fix what they broke?" Sarah looked around her bridge at the crew members who had been prepared to die for strangers, who had instead lived to see the fruits of their sacrifice. She thought about the human fleet gathering in the outer system, about the message that would soon reach Earth, about the galaxy that was about to learn what happened when humanity decided to care about something. "Yes," she said finally. "We'll stay. We'll help. And we'll make sure nothing like this ever happens again." The first human interstellar war was over, but Admiral Sarah Chen suspected it would not be the last. The galaxy had just learned that humanity was not a species to be ignored or underestimated. They had seen what Deathworlders could accomplish when properly motivated. The age of human expansion had begun, and it would be written in the stars themselves. 6 months after the Battle of Kythera Prime, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the rebuilt capital city of the planet she had helped save, watching as human and Kythera children played together in the streets. The scars of war were still visible, craters, filled with new construction, memorials to the dead rising like silver spears toward the sky. But life had returned to this world. The cost had been high. 23 human ships lost, over 8,000 crew members dead or missing. But the intelligence they had gained from the wreckage of the alien fleet, identified now as the hegemony, An ancient empire that had been enslaving species for millennia had proven invaluable. Earth's shipyards worked around the clock now, building vessels designed specifically for interstellar warfare. The lessons learned at Kythera had been incorporated into new ship designs, new weapons, new tactics. Humanity was preparing for a war that they now knew was inevitable. "Admiral," came a familiar voice behind her. Sarah turned to see Commander Webb, now bearing the insignia of a full admiral himself. The fleet had grown rapidly in the months. Following their victory, and experienced officers were desperately needed. "Marcus, how are the new recruits coming along?" Webb smiled grimly. "Eager. Word of what happened here has spread throughout human space. We've got more volunteers than we can process. Seems everyone wants to be part of the force that protects the innocent." Sarah nodded. The story of the Battle of Kythera Prime had become something of a legend among both humans and their alien allies. The species that had been dismissed as primitive had demonstrated that sometimes primitive was exactly what the situation required. "Any word from the deep space patrols?" 3 more systems have requested protection agreements. The Altarians, the Vegan Free States, and the Centauri. Republic. They've all seen what the hegemony does to undefended worlds, and they want human fleets standing guard. Sarah considered this. Each protection agreement meant more responsibility, more systems to defend, more potential flashpoints with the hegemony. But it also meant more allies, more resources, more intelligence about their ancient enemy. Approved. But make sure each system understands the terms. We protect them, but we do it our way. No interference with human military doctrine, no restrictions on our fleet movements, and absolute authority during combat operations. Webb nodded. "Understood. There's something else, Admiral. Intelligence reports suggest the hegemony is massing forces in the outer rim. It looks like they're preparing for a major offensive." Sarah wasn't surprised. The destruction of their expeditionary fleet at Kythera had been a severe blow to hegemony prestige. They would want revenge, and they would want to demonstrate that their defeat had been a fluke rather than a sign of human strength. Estimated strength? At least 1,000 ships, possibly more. All of them equipped with the advanced technology we encountered here. Sarah walked to the memorial wall that dominated the city center, reading the names of human and Kythera dead carved into the black stone. So many lives lost, so many families destroyed. And this was just the beginning. How many ships can we field? As of today, 237, with another 100 coming online over the next 6 months. But Admiral, Webb paused, uncertainty clear in his voice. Even with our new weapons and tactics, those odds... I know. Sarah touched the wall gently, feeling the weight of command settling on her shoulders once again. But we have something they don't understand, Marcus. We have something that no amount of advanced technology can replicate. What's that, ma'am? Sarah turned away from the memorial and looked out over the rebuilt city, where humans and Kythera worked side by side to create something better than what had been destroyed, where children played without fear because someone had been willing to die to protect them. We have a reason to fight. The hegemony conquers because that's what they've always done. They destroy because they can. But we fight because someone has to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. She straightened her uniform and began walking toward the spaceport, where her shuttle waited. And that makes all the difference. The war with the hegemony would be long and bloody. Entire star systems would burn before it was over. But humanity had evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. And they had not only survived, but thrived. Now they would show the galaxy what that meant on a larger stage. As Sarah's shuttle lifted off from Kythera Prime, she could see the orbital shipyards where new human vessels were taking shape. Sleek predators designed by a species that understood the true nature of warfare. Each ship carried the lessons learned in this system, the knowledge that sometimes the only answer to overwhelming force was even more overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. The hegemony had ruled the galaxy through fear for eons, but they had never faced an enemy that had been forged in the crucible of a death world, that had learned to fight not for conquest, but for survival. They were about to discover why humans were the apex predators of their home planet, and why, that made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The age of human expansion had begun, and it would be written in the stars with fire and blood, and the unwavering determination of a species that had never learned how to surrender. In the depths of space, ancient enemies were preparing for war, but on a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy, humanity was preparing something far more dangerous. Hope backed by the willingness to fight for it. The Deathworlders had heard the call for help, and they had answered with ruthless fleet power. They would not stop until the innocent were safe and the predators had learned to fear. The end.